Arthur Gallo sat in his usual booth at Trattoria Milano. The red leather was worn smooth over decades. His back was to the wall. Always. He watched the restaurant operate, a silent king in his court. Marco, his lieutenant, sat opposite, nursing an espresso, his eye scanning the room with a practiced, predatory calm. The place was Artie's. Not on paper, of course. But everyone knew. The owner polished his glasses and nodded from behind the bar, a gesture of deep, unwavering respect. The waiters moved with a quiet deference around his table, their paths diverting as if an invisible force field surrounded him. This was his world. Controlled. Predictable. He was sipping his wine, a deep Barolo that tasted of earth and time, when the woman walked in. Isabella Vance. She was loud. Her laughter was like shattering glass, a sound that grated on the quiet dignity of the old restaurant. She was with her husband, Silas, a man Artie considered a parasite. A stain. Silas built his empire on disrespect and cheap tricks. He had no honor. No code. Isabella wore a dress that cost more than the waiter's monthly salary and jewels that dripped from her neck and wrists, each one a testament to her husband's avarice. They were seated across the room. Artie ignored them. They were beneath his notice, noisy insects buzzing at the edge of his perception. A young waitress approached their table. She was new. Artie had not seen her before. She was pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of a deep and abiding exhaustion. She took their order, her hands trembling slightly as she held her notepad. As she reached to pour water for Isabella, her sleeve rode up. A bruise, dark and ugly, marked her slender wrist. Artie noted it. He noted everything. Then Isabella Vance laughed again, a harsh, braying sound, gesturing with her hand to emphasize some pointless story. The light from the chandelier caught the ring on her finger. It was a simple gold band with a small, imperfect pearl set in a filigree of tarnished silver. It was an old piece. It was out of place among her glittering, soulless diamonds. The waitress froze. Her eyes locked onto the ring. The water pitcher slipped from her grasp, shattering on the floor. Water and glass spread across the polished tiles. A sudden, sharp silence fell over the entire restaurant. Isabella Vance looked down at her ruined, expensive shoes with a sneer of disgust. But the waitress did not notice. Her gaze was fixed on the ring, a look of utter, soul-shattering disbelief etched onto her face. Her lips parted, and a single, choked whisper escaped, frail but carrying across the hushed room. That ring. She pointed with a trembling finger, an accusation and a plea all at once. That ring belonged to my mother. Isabella scoffed, pulling her hand back as if the girl's desperate gaze was a physical stain. The girl's eyes filled with tears, her voice cracking but gaining a desperate, ragged strength that defied her fragile appearance. She was wearing it. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next is a lesson in a kind of justice you will never, ever forget. If you believe that some line should never be crossed, hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss what we have coming. And let us know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let us get started. The restaurant manager, a man named Signore Rossi, scurried over, his face a mask of panicked apology. Signora Vance, my deepest apologies. Please, allow me to handle this. He turned to the waitress, his voice a low, angry hiss. What is the meaning of this? Get back in the kitchen. You are fired. Two of Artie's men, stationed discreetly by the entrance, began to move toward the commotion. Their job was to maintain the peace, to ensure no disruptions reached Artie's table. This was a disruption. A major one. But Artie raised a single, steady hand. Just a slight movement. It was enough. The men stopped instantly, melting back into the shadows as if they had never moved at all. Marco looked at his boss, an unspoken question in his eyes. This was not their business. This was a clumsy waitress and an arrogant woman. It was nothing. Artie's face was unreadable, carved from stone. But his eyes, dark and ancient, were fixed on the girl. He saw not just her fear, but the raw, unyielding truth in her gaze. It was a look he recognized. He had seen it in the mirror a lifetime ago. The girl, whose name he would soon learn was Elena, ignored the manager. She ignored the furious glare of Silas Vance. She took a step closer to Isabella, her hands clenched into small, white fists. "Please," she begged, her voice now thick with unshed tears. "Where did you get that?" "That was my mother's wedding ring. It was all I had left of her." Isabella Vance finally spoke, her voice dripping with venomous condescension. "I have no idea what you are talking about, you pathetic little thing. My husband bought this for me. Now get out of my sight before I have you arrested for harassment." Silas Vance stood up, puffing out his chest. He was a man who performed strength but possessed none. "You heard my wife. Get lost." He made to shove the girl. But he never got the chance. Artie was on his feet. He had not moved so quickly in years. He did not rush. He did not run. He simply flowed across the room, a phantom of tailored silk and quiet menace. The entire restaurant held its breath. He stopped beside the Vance's table, not even glancing at them. His focus was entirely on the weeping girl. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was a gesture so paternal, so completely out of character for the feared Arthur Gallo, that it sent a ripple of shock through the room. "Come," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Sit with me." He guided the stunned waitress, Elena, back to his own booth. He sat her down on the worn leather seat, then took his own place opposite her. He gestured to Marco. "Get the girl some water. And tell Rossi to put everything on my account, including the broken pitcher." He then turned his gaze, cold and hard as granite, towards Silas and Isabella Vance. "Enjoy your meal," he said. It was not a pleasantry. It was a threat. It meant, do not move, do not speak, do not breathe until I am finished here. They understood. They sat frozen, their expensive dinner suddenly turning to ash in their mouths. Artie Gallo was a name that carried weight in this city. He was not a gangster in the modern sense. He was a relic, a throwback to an older time when a man's word was his bond and respect was the only currency that mattered. He ran the docks, the unions, the quiet, unseen machinery of the city's underbelly. His business was built on order. He did not tolerate chaos. He did not tolerate disrespect. And he had a code. It was a simple code, but it was absolute. Rule 1, you do not harm women or children. Rule 2, you do not steal from the weak. Rule 3, you do not flaunt stolen honor. Silas Vance had built a career on breaking all three. He was new money, a thug who thought tailored suits and expensive cars made him a king. Artie saw him for what he was, a dog barking in a junkyard. But this dog had something that did not belong to him. And it was attached to a memory Artie had buried long ago. He turned his attention back to the girl, Elena. She was sipping the water Marco had brought, her trembling starting to subside. She looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean to cause trouble. I will lose my job." Artie shook his head slowly. "You will not lose your job. Tell me about the ring." His voice was softer now, encouraging. He was not a cop. He was not a judge. He was something else entirely. He was a man who balanced scales. Elena hesitated, then the story poured out of her, a torrent of grief and injustice. Her name was Elena Petru. She was 22 years old. Her mother had passed away a year ago, leaving her with nothing but a mountain of medical debt and that one simple ring. It was not worth much, she explained, twisting a napkin in her hands. "The pearl is misshapen. The silver is old. But it was my great-grandmother's. My mother never took it off. Not once. 2 months ago, her small apartment had been broken into. The thieves had not taken much. A cheap laptop, a few dollars from a jar. And the ring, which had been on her mother's jewelry box on the nightstand. I called the police, she said, her voice hollow. They took a report. They said there was nothing they could do. It was a simple property crime. Too common. No leads. She had given up hope of ever seeing it again. Until tonight. Until she saw it on the finger of that woman, glittering under the restaurant lights, a sacred memory turned into a vulgar accessory. I know it is the same one, she insisted, her eyes pleading with him to believe her. There is a small scratch on the band, right here. She traced a line on the table with her finger. My father made it by accident when he was fixing a pipe under the sink. My mother was so upset, but then she said it was a part of their story. A memory. Artie listened without interruption. He saw the scene perfectly. A small apartment. A desperate girl. Indifferent police. A world that did not care about a stolen memory. His world, however, was different. In his world, memories were everything. They were the foundations upon which men like him were built. He thought of his own mother. He remembered her hands, chapped and rough from a life of hard work. She had worn only one piece of jewelry. A plain, thin gold wedding band. It was her only treasure. When she was dying, in a hospital that smelled of bleach and despair, she had given it to him. Be a good man, Arturo, she had whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Not a rich man. Not a strong man. Just a good man. He had failed her in so many ways. His hands were not clean. His life was a monument to violence and fear. But he had never forgotten her words. He had tried to live by a version of them. His own twisted version. He protected his people. He provided for his family. He never, ever, preyed on the helpless. He looked at Elena's tear-streaked face, and he saw the ghost of his mother's hope. This was not about a ring. Not anymore. This was about a debt he could never fully repay. He made a decision. It was a quiet click in his mind, the sound of a heavy vault door swinging shut. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady. What is the address of the apartment that was robbed? Elena, confused, gave it to him. Artie turned to Marco, who had been standing silently by the table, watching the entire exchange with a carefully neutral expression. Marco, Artie said. Find out who works this neighborhood. Small-time burglaries. Pawn shops. I want the name of the crew that hit this girl's apartment. Marco nodded once. And Silas Vance, Artie continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I want to know where he gets his jewelry. Not the fancy stores. The other places. The ones that do not ask for certificates of authenticity. Consider it done, Artie. And one more thing, Artie said, turning back to Elena. I want you to go home. Rossi will give you your pay for the week, plus a severance. You will not be working here anymore. Elena's face fell. But I need this job. You will have a better one, Artie promised. My associate will take you home. Do not worry. You will be safe. He gestured to one of the men by the door. The man, a giant named Leo with a kind face, came over. Leo, escort Miss Petru home. Wait outside her building until I call you. Nobody goes in or out. Leo nodded. Yes, boss. Elena looked from Artie to Leo, her mind reeling. This was all happening so fast. She was in a world she did not understand, surrounded by men who spoke in codes and moved with a purpose she could not fathom. But the ring, she stammered. Artie gave her a small, rare smile. It did not quite reach his eyes, but it held a promise that was more binding than any legal contract. The ring will be returned to you. He watched as Leo led the bewildered girl out of the restaurant. Then, his face hardened again. He stood up and walked over to the Vance's table. They flinched as he approached. My apologies for the interruption to your dinner, Artie said, the words coated in ice. It seems there was a misunderstanding. Silas, regaining a sliver of his bravado, blustered, "That girl was crazy. She should be locked up." Artie ignored him, his eyes locking onto Isabella's. He looked at the ring on her finger. The small, imperfect pearl seemed to shrink under his gaze. "That is a lovely piece," he said softly. "An antique, I imagine. It must have a great deal of sentimental value." Isabella, emboldened by his calm tone, lifted her chin. "It does," she said haughtily. "It is a family heirloom." Artie's eyes narrowed. A lie? A stupid, careless lie. He had given her a chance to show a sliver of grace, and she had spat on it. "Family is very important," Artie said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Memories are all we have in the end. It is a terrible thing when someone tries to steal them." He let the words hang in the air for a moment. Then he turned and walked back to his table without another word. Marco returned a few minutes later, slipping back into the booth. "The girl is on her way home. Leo is with her," he reported. "Good," Artie said, swirling the last of the wine in his glass. He was thinking. Connecting dots. A small-time robbery. A unique, not particularly valuable ring. And it ends up on the finger of Isabella Vance, a woman who only wears the most expensive jewels. It did not add up. Unless Silas Vance was not just a legitimate, albeit crooked, businessman. Unless he was also a fence. A man who dealt in the misery of others, buying stolen goods for pennies on the dollar to gift to his wife. It was a new level of disrespect. It was personal. The phone in Marco's pocket buzzed. He answered, listened for a moment, and then hung up. "I have a name," he said. "A two-bit crew run by a punk named Donnie Fingers Costello. They work the west side, hitting apartments. Known for being sloppy. They fence their goods through a pawn shop on 10th Avenue. "And the pawn shop?" Artie asked. "The owner is a man named Sal. He has a silent partner who buys up the unique stuff before it ever hits the display case," Marco said, a look of understanding dawning on his face. "Let me guess," Artie said, his voice flat. "The partner is Silas Vance." Marco nodded. "Looks that way. The pieces fit." It was a dirty, pathetic little operation. Stealing from working people to adorn the hands of a woman who had everything. It was the kind of ugliness Artie Gallo did not permit in his city. "Get Donnie Fingers," Artie ordered. "Bring him to the warehouse. And find out where Sal the pawnbroker is. I want to have a conversation with both of them. Tonight." "And the Vances?" Marco asked. Artie looked across the room. Silas and Isabella were trying to pretend that nothing had happened, but their fear was a palpable stench in the air. "They can finish their dinner," Artie said. "I will see them for dessert." The warehouse was down by the docks, a cavernous space that smelled of rust and saltwater. It was one of Artie's places. A place for conversations that required privacy. Donnie Fingers Costello was tied to a chair in the center of the vast, empty floor. He was a young man, barely older than Elena, with terrified eyes and a cheap bravado that had long since evaporated. Sal the pawnbroker was in the corner, weeping quietly. Artie walked in, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He did not say a word. He simply circled the chair, looking at Donnie from all angles, as if inspecting a piece of damaged goods. "You broke into an apartment on West 48th Street 2 months ago," Artie said. It was not a question. Donnie started to deny it, a reflexive, pathetic lie. "I don't know what you're—" Marco, standing behind him, slapped him once, hard, across the back of the head. The sound cracked through the warehouse. "Do not lie to me," Artie said, his voice still calm, which was far more terrifying than if he had shouted. "Lying is a sign of disrespect. And I am having a very bad night for disrespect." Donnie's bravado shattered completely. "Yeah," he whimpered. "Yeah, it was us. It was just a small job. We didn't get much." You got a laptop, Artie said. A few dollars. And a ring. A gold band with an imperfect pearl. Donnie's eyes widened in surprise. How did you? Where is the ring? Artie asked, cutting him off. I sold it, Donnie said quickly. I sold all of it to Sal. Over there. He gives us a cut for everything we bring in. Artie turned his attention to the pawnbroker. Sal, he said, his voice deceptively gentle. You and I have known each other a long time. You have always followed the rules. What happened? Sal, a portly man with sweat beading on his bald head, scrambled to his feet. Artie, I swear, I didn't know. Vance, he leaned on me. Said he wanted first look at any unique estate pieces that came in. He paid cash, no questions. He said it was for his wife. He liked giving her stories. Stories. The word made Artie's stomach turn. Silas Vance was not just buying stolen goods. He was stealing people's lives, their histories, and gifting them to his vapid wife to be worn as trophies. The ring, Artie said, his patience wearing thin. Donnie brought it in. Did you sell it to Vance? Sal nodded miserably. Yes. He came in the next day. He saw it in the back. He laughed. He said it was charmingly pathetic and that Isabella would love the irony. He gave me $200 for it. $200. For a memory that was priceless. Artie felt a cold, clean rage settle over him. It was the kind of rage that led to quiet, permanent solutions. He looked at Donnie. You broke into the home of a girl who works 2 jobs to pay off the debts her dead mother left her. You stole the only thing she had left of her family. You did this for a few $100s. Donnie started to sob. I'm sorry, I didn't know. That is the problem, Artie said. You do not know. You do not care. You and your kind, you are termites. Eating away at the foundations of things. You see a house, but you do not see the home. You see a ring, but you do not see the love it represents. He turned to Marco. This one's business in our city is concluded. Permanently. And Sal, you are going to take a long vacation. When you come back, your shop will have a new owner. Someone who understands the rules. Marco and 2 other men escorted the whimpering men away. Artie stood alone in the center of the warehouse for a long moment. The scales were not yet balanced. There was one more debt to be collected. Silas and Isabella Vance lived in a penthouse apartment overlooking the park. It was a palace of glass and steel, cold and sterile, filled with expensive art that they did not understand and furniture that was meant to be looked at, not lived in. When the doorbell rang, Silas answered it, expecting a late-night delivery. He found Arthur Gallo standing in his hallway. Marco and Leo were behind him. They were not smiling. Gallo, Silas stammered, his face draining of color. What is this? We have a business matter to discuss, Artie said, walking past him into the apartment. Isabella was in the living room, wearing a silk robe. She gasped when she saw them. What do you want? She demanded, her voice shrill. Artie ignored her. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at the city lights. This is a beautiful view, he said. You can see everything from up here. All the little people, running around in their little lives. He turned back to face them. You ever wonder about them, Silas? The people who clean your office. The girl who serves you coffee. The waitress who brought you your water tonight. What are you talking about? Silas said, trying to sound tough. I am talking about respect, Artie said, taking a step closer. A concept you are unfamiliar with. You see, in my world, we have rules. We do not steal from the people we are meant to protect. We do not take a woman's last connection to her dead mother and give it to a fool as a trinket. Isabella clutched her hand to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. The ring, Artie said, his gaze falling on her hand. That family heirloom. Take it off. Now. Her hand trembled as she struggled with the clasp. She finally slid it off and held it out. Artie did not take it. Put it on the table, he commanded. She placed it on the polished surface of a glass coffee table. The small, imperfect pearl seemed to glow with a soft, mournful light. That ring, Artie said, his voice a low, chilling whisper, was purchased with the sweat and love of a good man for a good woman. It was passed down through generations. It saw births and deaths. It absorbed a family's history. It is worth more than this entire apartment. It is worth more than your entire pathetic life. He looked at Silas. You are a fence. A bottom feeder. You profit from the misery of others. You have no honor. Therefore, you have no business operating in my city. Silas began to sweat. Listen, Gallo, we can make a deal. Whatever you want. Money. I have money, Artie cut him off. What you have is a debt. And tonight, it is being paid in full. He nodded to Marco. The resolution was swift. It was quiet. It was permanent. The papers would call it a tragic accident. A wealthy couple, a fall from a balcony. No one would ask any questions. Artie picked up the small ring from the table. He held it in the palm of his hand. It felt warm. It felt alive with memory. He closed his hand around it and walked out of the cold, silent apartment without looking back. Elena was sitting in her small, tidy living room when the knock came. She opened the door to find Arthur Gallo standing there. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "May I come in?" he asked. She nodded, stepping aside. He walked into the room, which was sparsely furnished but filled with pictures of a smiling woman who looked just like Elena. Her mother. He held out his hand, palm open. The ring lay there. Elena gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face as she reached out and took it. She slid it onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. "How?" she whispered, looking up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear. "There was a misunderstanding," Artie said simply. "It has been resolved." He saw the question in her eyes. The question everyone eventually asked. I do not have any money to pay you," she stammered. "I could never afford." "You already paid me," he said. "Tonight, you reminded me of something I had forgotten. That is worth more than money." She looked at the powerful, dangerous man standing in her humble living room. The man who had moved heaven and earth to retrieve a worthless, priceless ring for a stranger. "Are you a good man?" she asked, the question soft and direct. Artie was silent for a long moment. He thought of his mother's dying wish. He thought of the life he had lived. The violence. The fear. The darkness. "No," he said finally, his voice heavy with a lifetime of truth. "I am not." But tonight, he looked at the ring on her finger, then back at her face. "Tonight, I got to be." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple white business card. It had only a phone number on it. No name. No company. "This is my number," he said, placing it on the table. "You will not need a new job. Your mother's medical debts have been taken care of. You are going to go to college. You will study whatever you want. It will all be paid for. If anyone ever bothers you again, for any reason, you call this number. Do you understand?" Elena could only nod, speechless, the tears continuing to fall. He turned to leave. "Mr. Gallo," she called out. He stopped at the door. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with a profound, soul-deep gratitude. He simply nodded and walked out into the night. 5 years passed. Arthur Gallo sat in his office, a quiet room above the Trattoria Milano. The city had changed. New players had come and gone. But he remained. A constant. A rock. Marco came in, placing a small stack of mail on his desk. "The quarterly reports, boss." Artie nodded, but his eyes were on one particular envelope. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock. He picked it up. There was no return address, but he knew who it was from. He opened it. Inside was a graduation announcement. Elena Petru. Summa cum laude. Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Tucked inside was a photograph. Elena was standing in a cap and gown, a radiant smile on her face. She was holding her diploma in one hand. On the other, the small, imperfect pearl on her mother's ring shone softly. On the back of the photo, a short message was written in neat script. I help people now. Because a good man once helped me. Thank you. Artie looked at the picture for a long time. He then opened a desk drawer and took out a small, velvet-lined box. Inside was his mother's thin, plain gold wedding band. He placed the photograph next to it. He had a collection of them now. One for every year. Elena at a university football game. Elena volunteering at a clinic. Elena standing in front of her first new car. Each photo was a report card on his investment. A testament to a single night when he chose to balance a different kind of scale. His office walls were bare, except for one small, framed picture near his desk. It was not of his wife or his children. It was a copy of that first graduation photo. A memento. A reminder. Sometimes, true power is not about the ability to take, but the choice to give. It is not measured in dollars or territory, but in the quiet, unseen moments of grace that can change a life forever. In a world full of darkness, a single act of kindness can be its own form of justice. It can be a light that echoes through the years, proving that even a man who has lived his life in the shadows can, for one perfect moment, create something truly good.